we will most likely always choose self-preservation over doing what's right.
Yeah, we do.
Especially when we get desperate. Especially when we get afraid. See, I look at Peter, and Peter is us.
Yes, yes.
On the right day, given the right circumstances, we even today betray and deny our Lord. Day by day, there's a thought that denies Jesus. Day by day, there's an action that denies Jesus. Day by day, we speak a word that denies Jesus. Day by day, we make choices that deny Jesus. We get it wrong sometimes because we get desperate, because we try to preserve our lives, because we are afraid, just like Peter. And so here's my question I want to raise today, is that knowing that we're going to get it wrong, how can we work through our human condition knowing that the Lord still loves us? How can we keep it moving, realizing that in our brokenness, we are going to fail, we are going to fall? How do we survive when we mess up? Now, if you don't plan on messing up ever in your life, you can go tune me out right now. But for those of us who know that not tomorrow, but as soon as you step out of these doors, you're going to have a misstep somewhere. As soon as you encounter that knucklehead in your neighborhood, you're going to have a misstep. As soon as you step onto the job, you're going to have something that will happen, and you will be tempted to get it wrong. And, might I add, you might get it wrong. How, Lord? In spite of our temporary setbacks and failures and falls down, how do we get back up and keep on living knowing that you desire to get the glory out of our lives? We can't escape the possibility that we'll get it wrong. But we can live inside of God's grace and mercy in such a way that we can keep on working through it because God has given us that opportunity. I like Peter because Peter, among all the other disciples, besides Judas that we talked about last week, Peter is always messing up, always putting his foot in his mouth, always causing some confusion. And that led up to this point where Peter denies the Lord. Just like last week, I told you, you need to learn how to talk to yourself. Well, Peter is trying to tell us some things about his own failure so that we can navigate through our own. Peter would tell us this firstly. You have to realize, number one, that some things you just can't change. At the root of many of the times that we have fallen flat on our faces is because we have tried to change something that we didn't have power to change. Some things you just can't change. After arresting Jesus, they took him to the house of the high priest until daybreak. And Peter is discreetly following Jesus from a distance. He has the right instinct. He wants to stay close to his Lord. But he, in his heart of hearts, wants to do something. But he hasn't fully embraced the fact that there's nothing he can do. Anybody ever been there? Been led into a circumstance or a situation where there is absolutely nothing that you could do but stand by and watch while it unfolded. And the minute we are tempted to insert ourselves thinking that we can make a difference, we have just set ourselves up for a fall and a failure. because there are just some things we cannot change. Peter was trying to be at the Lord's side, but he really wasn't by his side. He couldn't be by his side because the walk that Jesus had to walk, he had to walk alone. There was no room for Peter to do anything. You wonder why sin can mess with us? Partly because we fail to realize we're not as strong as we think. We're not as bright as we think. We're not as smart as we think. We're not as holy as we think. We're not as spiritual as we think. And we have to embrace that. There are just some things we cannot change. We can get close, but we end up falling flat on our faces. What would it look like in your life if you took a load off and said, you know what? I'm going to do everything that the Lord gives me to do, but I am not going to try to do what only the Lord can do. All right. That's a heavy load taken off of our lives. All of us are guilty of failing. I've already said that. We're guilty of self-satisfaction when we want what we want and we don't think anything about the consequences. We are guilty of self-preservation when we think we need it now and can't do without it, so we hold on for dear life to the lives that we think we have. We're all guilty of self-deception. We will fool ourselves into thinking one thing that really ain't true. But God says, give me your whole life, knowing that you're not going to get it all right. But when you give me your life, you are trusting that I'm going to do for you what you could never do for yourself. There are some things that we just cannot change. And we have to accept that. Part of the root of our fallen human condition is that we try to occupy God's seat. Anybody ever sat in God's seat before? Yeah, you have. We do it every day. We make our own decisions. We don't check in with headquarters. We do our own thing. We don't ask God's permission. We make our own choices. We don't seek God's guidance. All of that means that we are saying, God, I know better than you. And God is saying, would you get out of my seat? Because some things you're going to encounter, you can't handle, but I can. But if you're sitting in the driver's seat, how am I going to drive? We get it wrong because we try to control, because we don't yet recognize there are some things we just cannot change. And God is saying, trust me with your life. Yeah, there are some things that God gives us the capacity to engage. But many things in our lives are beyond our pay grade. And we just don't need to get involved in. Peter tried to stay close, thought he might have figured out a way to do something, but he couldn't do anything. All he could do was get himself deeper in trouble that led him to his ultimate betrayal and denial. God says, let me work in your life. Don't get caught up, hung up, distracted in what only I can do for you. Peter would say, there's some things you just can't change. Here's what else Peter would tell us. This test, whatever the test you're going through right now, is just a lesson. The test is a lesson. In other words, when you fall into some stuff, yeah, God is testing you, but God already knows before you got into the test that you were going to fail. But even in the failure, God's trying to teach you something. Y'all missed that. Sometimes we are hoping, God, keep me from failing, keep me from falling, keep me from messing up. But God is saying, yeah, but I know you're going to mess up anyway. And I'm going to have to let this unfold because there's something you need to learn. That's a hard thing to think about. Peter, if you read between the lines, has now separated himself, isolated himself from the other disciples. He's off by himself on this mission that he can do nothing about. But he's there, isolated from his support system, has nobody there. He's all by himself. And when you read the text, he snuggles up with the people who are there. They invite him to come sit by the campfire. That was a mistake. Because what they were saying is, yeah, come on in. Which set him up to be tested. But the test also set him up for the failure that would inevitably come. You ever been in a situation where you let something unchristian come out of your mouth? Okay, stop lying, shame devil. He's in this circumstance. And they say, aren't you one of them? I don't know the brother. Oh, I think you've been with him. I don't know what you're talking about, cuss. I don't know the brother. Yeah, you're a Galilean. You betray with your speech. You were with him. I said, cuss. I don't know him. That's the sanitized version. But you understand that he was led into this situation because he got led closer to the wrong company, which pulled some things out of him that never would have happened had he allowed some distance to be between him and them. I'll say it a different way. If you don't want to fall, make sure that the people you get close to are people who have your best interests at heart. See, in a moment of defeat, you don't want somebody pushing you into sin. You want somebody holding you back from sin.
Right.
They kindled a fire and invited Peter to come sit with them. The Bible doesn't say who they were, but you know who they were. They were the folk who cared nothing about you or God. They are the folk who don't mind seeing you fall down. They are the folk who want to see you fail. They are the folks who don't want the best that God has for you, but they only want what they want from you. That's who they are. Create some distance, but recognize that all of this is just a test, and the test is that so you can learn something. Here's where I'm going with this. Peter failed, but what he had to learn was that he couldn't do it separated from his support system. He had to learn that he couldn't function all by himself. He had to learn that he had some weak spots in his life that needed to be dealt with. And the only way that he ever would have learned that is when those weak spots showed in this moment. Sometimes, y'all, God will let you get in some tight spots, knowing that you're going to mess it up, because he wants you to see you.
Wow.
I'll say that again. Sometimes you've been hiding from you. And the only way that you get to the real you is when you're tested and you fall. So now you can see you. I've never told this story, but I'm going to share it with y'all. When I was in high school, I was a pretty good kid. I was an athlete, and I was in all the AP classes, and so I was hanging out with